Welcome to Bunny Hugs and Mental Health, the podcast that deals with all things mental health. We talk to professionals, survivors, and loved ones about their sometimes informative, sometimes uplifting, and sometimes tragic stories. I'm your host of the show, Todd Rennebaum, advocate, recovering addict, experienced sufferer of depression and anxiety, and author of the children's book, Sometimes Daddy Cries. Hello and welcome to another episode of Bunny Hugs and Mental Health here on the Saskatchewan Podcast Network. I am Todd Rennebaum. Now normally I turn my furnace off when I'm recording so you don't get this weird sound, but the fan might kick on while I'm doing this intro because it's minus 35 and I can't shut it off for more than a few minutes. So yeah, welcome to winter in Saskatchewan. Over the last few weeks here, I've got quite a few more new listeners and people reaching out and leaving messages and saying nice things. And I just want to thank Natalie Camilla01 on Instagram for following. And I'd also like to thank Stefania Catalfamo. I think I said that right. She's an artist and she's found us, I guess, or this podcast and is listening. And I just want to say hi and thanks for listening. And also thank you to everyone that's been listening from the beginning or whether you're new or whatever. So this week on the episode, I am talking to Michael Landsberg. You may know him from TSN. For Americans or non-Canadians listening, TSN is like the ESPN station here in Canada or the sports station. He had a talk show on there called Off the Record where he interviewed all types of sports celebrities. And he also has a charity called Sick Not Weak. If you hashtag Sick Not Weak, you can see all types of stuff he's been doing on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, all that stuff. And he also has a documentary that's been out for quite a while called Darkness and Hope, Depression, Sports, and Me. It's a great charity he has. It's a great documentary he has. It's a great talk show he had. And he still is a really great guy. And so I talked to him about all that stuff. I talked to him about him coming out with mental illness or depression, what was about 10 years ago, and about a mutual friend we have. A while back, I interviewed Tyson Williams for an episode, and his story involves Michael Landsberg. So at the beginning of the interview, we talk about him a little bit. He in a roundabout way saved Tyson Williams' life. Tyson Williams was suicidal. He was about to take his own life when he was watching TV, and Michael Landsberg started talking about how he has depression and stuff. So yeah, it's a really good story. You can go back and listen to that episode. And you go back to listen to all the episodes. There's approximately 30 of them now, so feel free to listen to those. Anyway, without further ado, I now give you Michael Landsberg. So I got to know Tyson Williams, and that's how I got through my connection to you. So that's a pretty interesting story.
It really is.
Yeah, is that pretty intense that he was basically on death's door when he heard you speak about it?
Yeah, it's a great story, or it's a really significant story that changed my life for sure, and according to him, saved his life, and changed the direction of my life for sure, and other people as well. So it really is an amazing story, and I'll be happy to answer any question you want. So
right, well. I have interviewed him before, so I do know his story a bit, but if you don't mind just starting off kind of where well, for me anyway, I didn't know I had mental illness until I was kind of, in my early or later years, and then I can look back and realize, holy shit, I've actually had it since I was like 10 years old. So is that kind of similar for yourself?
I think that's very common, whether it's a period of 20 years or whether it's a period of 6 months. I think there's a lack of awareness because sometimes these illnesses, don't happen that quickly. It's very, very tiny changes that happen in us, which we
Right.
don't realize are happening. And the cumulative effect can be really dramatic, but because we don't feel it changing, sometimes we're not even aware of it. And it's like someone will say, I mean, how many times have you heard this story where someone says, you know, you don't seem like yourself, you seem like you've changed, and people get indignant. And part of that could be because of the stigma, but also part of it is because they don't realize it. You know, these tiny changes add up to something massive, but because they happen so slowly, you don't feel them. So I think your story is very common. And there's a second part of that story, which is that you've never lived in anybody else's head. So you don't know what's normal, right? You know, especially when it's with you so long term, you know, the abnormal becomes normal. And I think for a lot of us, you just kind of accept it as this is the way I am wired, or this is the way human beings are, because you've never been in anyone else's head.
Yeah, that's right. So now that you can look back, when do you think about what age did you that it become obvious to you older that, oh shit, I was going through something back then?
Yeah, I think for me, I was anxious, and I would say I was battling general anxiety disorder, and sort of all that means from the time I can remember anything in my life. But I'd never heard of general anxiety disorder. I never really contemplated the idea that maybe I had a sickness. I just thought that I was afraid of stuff. I thought that I was weak, or I mean, I don't remember exactly how I looked at it, but certainly I didn't think to myself, you know, I wish I could just tell my parents and go to a doctor. That never even occurred to me. I just thought this is how I'm wired. I guess I'm afraid of things that other kids aren't afraid of. And I just kind of went on with it. And then, especially as I went on and had a son, Corey, who I saw battling exactly the same things that I had battled and was still battling. It was this, oh my gosh, wow. So it was like they were diagnosing him. They were figuring out what was up with him. And I was applying it to myself, right? Because I had exactly the same symptoms. And there's no medical test for this, right? It's not like, well, his was different because when they did a blood test, it came up differently. All we know is what people tell us. And what I heard from Corey was exactly what I heard from me, or what went on in my head. So when they said, okay, well, you know, Corey has general anxiety disorder and some specific anxieties and ADHD, it was like, well, that explains everything in my life. It was like someone had just revealed to me it was like I watched a movie, and the movie was in a foreign language that I didn't understand. And now all of a sudden I started watching the movie again, and it had subtitles, and I could understand what was going on in this movie. I understood what was going on in my life back then, all of the things that I'd gone through and battled and wondered, why did I do that? And now I kind of had an idea why. So that was anxiety. Depression was a much shorter period of time. I would say I went 6 months without really realizing how sick I was. Again, because over the course of that 6 months, I had just been making, or having made to me, tiny changes, like that were so small that I didn't notice they were going on. And then one day it was like, oh my, like, why did I just do what I did? Why did I just turn down that opportunity to do something that normally would have sounded like it was really fun? And I started to look at my previous 6 months in my life, and I came to the conclusion that something was really wrong with me. I came to the conclusion that I had disappeared. I had ceased to exist as I knew it. I had become somebody else, and I did not want to be that person. I did not like that person. And that's what pushed me as quickly as I possibly could to get help.
Yeah, it took me a while before I found help, but well, actually, I did look for help. I actually drove myself to the ER, and unfortunately, in this province, it's a big thing. It's a hot button issue right now, especially mental health and the accessibility to services. And I was sent home. They basically said, just, you know, you're fine. You know, we believe you. You're suicidal, but unless you, and I was told this at the time, unless you actually attempted, we're not going to admit you to the hospital, which is fine. But there was no other services either that was given to me. It was just go home. So then,
How long ago was that?
That was about 9 years ago, I think.
Right. And
unfortunately, about a year ago, there was
that unfortunately 9 years later is not uncommon.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, not uncommon in any province in Canada. I mean, that story is told over and over again.
Yeah.
And, there's so much that's wrong with our system when it comes to mental health. And it's really easy to blame the people within the system, right? It's easy to say, oh, God, I went to the emergency room and they told me, okay, well, unless you're going to try to kill yourself, we're not going to keep you. But the problem is if you have 10 beds and they're all filled and there's already 3 people in the hallway, it's like, well, what else are you going to do? It's more often than not, it's not the fault of the people that are in the system. It's the fault of the fact that mental health has fallen through the cracks of our system and has been allowed to lag behind other specialties in medicine by 10, 15, 20, 30 years even. Like we're now dealing with situations that probably were dealt with in cardiology 30 years ago.
Right. Yeah, that's right. And I agree fully. Anyone, because I started working in mental health and addictions, and I can tell you the people that do work in the system are completely passionate, wonderful people. It's just the system itself is lacking. So I agree 100%. That was in 2000. I'm sorry. I watched your Darkness and Hope, Depression, Sports and Me documentary. And I think it said, was it 2008 and 2009 kind of when you were really suffering?
Yeah. I mean, first of all, don't apologize for not knowing, because there's a lot about your life I don't know. But it doesn't really matter. It was 2008 when I had my sort of most profound moment of depression. It was, and I use this as an example to people of how open I want to be and I want others to be. But it was 11/24/08 YUL MH5210400. I love saying that. So that would represent 11/24/08, November the 24th, 2008. YUL is the airport code for Montreal. MH521 is Marriott Hotel, room 521. 0400 is 4 a.m. in the morning. And I had gone through over a year of severe depression, where I had really ceased to exist other than to sustain myself, eating as little as I possibly could, not intentionally, but I was just surviving. I was just living, but I wasn't alive. And that was a day when I realized I know why people take their own lives. Like, it was really clear to me that the idea of fighting through this pain for a much longer period of time was way scarier to me than dying. But I had been through it before. I had been off medication at that point for about a year and a half. And I had been through it where medication helped me. So I had at least some amount of hope. But if I would have been in that hotel room without any hope whatsoever, if I've never been through it before, or if I had tried, say, all kinds of different therapy and medications and ECT and all of these things, and I was still in that position, I really can't say whether or not I would have survived. And if I survived that night, I can't tell you that I would have survived a month later, a year later, because at a certain point, we all just get worn out from the pain that we're experiencing and the idea that our life is only one thing. It's only a battle. You wake up in the morning and the battle is only to get through the day so you can get back in bed and shut everything down and just kind of be on your own and just suffer in silence.
So you did have some, I wouldn't say you're suicidal, but you did have suicidal thoughts, or at least you connected with people that maybe
totally. So the question that you were leading up to, or maybe was we were talking about, was 2009 with Tyson Williams, the Stefan Richer show on Off the Record, which ultimately changed my life, and it changed a number of people's lives. My life, Stefan Richer's life. Apparently, it saved this guy Tyson Williams' life. I know it changed about 20 other people's lives, because I got correspondence from all of them, and it all happened by chance. I wish I could tell the story and say, I wanted to make a difference on this planet. So I went out, and even though it was very difficult for me, I told my story of mental health, and it like that wasn't what it was at all. I just I had never spoken about it on TV because I thought nobody would care. It wasn't that I was ashamed or embarrassed, because I wasn't. I just thought, who's going to care? People just think, oh, this arrogant guy just wants us to like him. And the only reason why I thought of it is because Stefan Richer, I had read, had battled depression in the 1990s. So I thought, oh, that'll make for a good question. I wasn't thinking, well, when people see this, they're really going to be impacted. So I asked him to come outside of the green room because I didn't want to ambush him. And I said, would it be okay if I asked you about depression? And he said, I'd rather not talk about it. It's very painful. And I said, well, okay, I'm glad that I asked you in advance because I don't want to cause you any pain. But if you'll talk about it, I'll talk about it. And he said, well, what would you talk about? And I told him a bit about my story. And he said, wow, okay, sure. And we went on the air and we talked for maybe 90 seconds. And he said something that really shaped how I talk about depression. He said, imagine a Canadian kid drafted by the Montreal Canadiens after growing up in Montreal. I win a Stanley Cup with the Montreal Canadiens. I'm on the ice with the cup, and all I want to do is go home and get in bed and get away from everyone. I never experienced a moment of joy playing hockey. And I thought, wow, that is really at the heart of depression, the loss of the ability to experience joy. From the outside, people look and see us having good things happen to us, and they say, wow, that must be great. And you can look like you're the happiest person on the planet, but you can't feel it. And that kind of, it was like this bell went on my head and said, wow, that's a great example of something we all experience when we have depression. We just don't have this sort of dramatic moment where we're holding up the cup and we want to go home to bed. And I said on that show, I said, hey, me too, very similar things other than, obviously your success with the Stanley Cup. But for me, I understand that. I understand what it's like, to go through your day without being able to feel anything good. And that was it. And the next day I started getting emails. And that's what changed my life, because I found out that there was huge value in just the two of us talking about it. And the key was not so much what we were saying. It was how we were saying it, because we were not sheepish about it. We weren't, well, I don't know why I get like this, but I shouldn't feel this way, but I have this thing called depression. I know I shouldn't be depressed. I mean, that's weakness. But we were saying basically it was, am I allowed to swear?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. So it was basically this. Hey, I got this illness, depression. If you don't like it, fuck you. I don't care what you think. Could care less. This, for me, is something that I am fighting. I didn't acquire this because I was weak. This is not self-inflicted. I can't will it away. So fuck off if you think that my illness is a reflection of my weakness. That's what we conveyed, and that's what impacted people and changed people's lives, and then changed my life, because I knew now all of a sudden I had something powerful to talk about, and that it was incredibly easy for me to talk about it. Like I said before, this wasn't me saying, hey, I'm going to suck it up and go out there and tell people this story of my mental illness because I want to change their lives. This right now is really easy for me, and in many ways a joy for me.
Right. Yeah. Your story sounds similar to mine. Not that I was talking to a hockey player, but that, well, I wrote a letter. There was going to be a bunch of job cuts at the psych ward in Regina. So I wrote a letter, and I talked about being, I'm a suicide attempt survivor and all this stuff. And I put it out all on the line, and I sent it out to local papers, and it went crazy viral, tens of thousands of shares and all this stuff.
Really?
And so, and again, too, I was like, I didn't write that letter for the same reasons you didn't talk about depression with Stefan, but so I was kind of thrown into this role a little bit, but at the same time I find it incredibly healing for myself. I found it I don't know, I'm good at it too. I don't mind talking about it. It was never a problem for me to talk about. So.
Yeah, when you find out that you have something of value for people, and we all have things of value to people. If you had $10,000 in the bank, that would be valuable to other people. But it would also hurt you to give up that $10,000. We're not giving up anything right now. It's not like I give up anything to be this advocate, to start this charity, to go around talking about it. There's an unlimited resource, an unlimited tank full of sharing for me that does not get depleted when I do it. So when we're done this, it's not like I'm going to have less sharing in me than I had before. It's like, bring on the next. So this letter that you sent that went viral, do you still have it?
I do, yeah.
Okay, send it to me.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, I'd love to see it.
Yeah, and it's kind of funny because I tried to retract it, but it was too late. It was already sent because I had a moment of like, oh shit, this is, everyone's going to know my business. And I felt really, really scared. And so I sent a few emails to try to retract it. And then I had a dentist appointment, and I walked into my dentist's office, and he approached me and he said, "Hey, I just read your letter in the paper, and it was amazing." And I almost fell to my knees. I started bawling. I was like, oh no! But it turned into this wonderful, like my path in life just went whoop whoop, and now this is my passion. I was just talking about this stuff, and
yeah, that's a great story, and just the fact that you tried to retract it makes the story even better. Yeah. And the fact that your dentist shocked you by admiring you the way he did, right? It was like, wow. I tell people all the time, look, if I'm giving a speech in front of a group of people, pre-pandemic, obviously, I'll say, hey, you're all worried about being perceived as weak if you share your mental illness. But here I am, in front of this room on the stage with the microphone. I'm the guy who's sharing. And I would ask, if this was a poll, who do you think is the strongest person in the room? You're going to pick me. Right? Which is not me saying I'm stronger than anyone else, but you see my sharing as a sign of strength. Why is it that you can't see your own sharing as a sign of strength? Why do you think that this makes you look weak?
Yeah, I get told all the time, because I do some speaking stuff, and it's so brave of you to talk, and I just hate it. It's like, no, I'm not. I'm just sharing. That's not brave of me.
It's a great point. I mean, I when I say it's a great point, I certainly relate to that. And I'll often respond to it by saying, until we get to the point where no one says it's brave of you to share, and we'll know that we're still living in a stigmatized world, right? Because no one would say it's brave of you to share if you had, most other illnesses.
That's right.
People would just go, oh, okay, well, good for you for sharing. Maybe it'll help somebody else. But no one's going to call it brave. Why? The perception that it takes courage is somebody else's bias when it comes to the illness, that they put themselves in your position and say, I could never do that because people would see me a certain way.
Bingo. Yeah, I love it. God damn it, I had a point and I forget what it was. It doesn't matter. Something you said in your documentary, I'm just paraphrasing here, but like why do people, and I find especially men, why do they reach out to celebrities or people that are, and not to their fans or family or the person they're sleeping next to? Like what is it about that that's my biggest, I don't know, my biggest thing.
I think it's leave the celebrity point, leave that for a second and just say, why do they reach out to strangers, which is what it is, because that celebrity is to that person, chances are, is a stranger, right?
Right. Yeah.
So why do you reach out to a stranger? And you reach out to a stranger, because you're not worried about what they will think of you to the point where it'll affect your life in the world that you live in. B, you reach out to somebody who has a mental illness, a celebrity who's spoken about it, because they're safe, right? That that it'd be much more difficult for Michael Landsberg, not that I'm a celebrity, but it'd be much more difficult for me to judge you if you were sharing your depression with me, if I've already talked about mine. So it's like, I'm safe, it's anonymous. And there's a perception of most people who are celebrities that they have achieved a lot in their life, whether it be as an athlete or as a musician. And there is the perception of strength. So there's the thought that this celebrity that I'm going to reach out to is strong and still has been affected by mental illness. Therefore, mental illness is not a weakness, but just an illness. So it vindicates us in many different ways. It's safe. And it's also, it's also part of the culture we live in, which is, we have this interest, affinity for people that we recognize from some kind of thing other than life.
Right. Yeah. And that's bit what this podcast is about. Like, I've been doing enough now that I know you're not a celebrity, as you say, but you are. It's I don't know. I have everyday people come on and talk about different mental illnesses, and now some, I'll say, higher profile people are starting to talk about it too. And I think it's important for both to open up and talk, and for people to know that, I mean, it's all walks of life, and it's not just depression and anxiety. It's like, I live in a small town called Indian Head, Saskatchewan, and I have so many people I could talk to in this town about a completely different type of mental illness. And just the fact that there's that many mental illnesses in a small group, I just don't understand why there's still a stigma when it affects everyone. I don't know.
You know, I mean, if you ask me why I think there's a stigma, it'll be a long answer. But if I were to cut it down, if you were to say, I'll give you 30 seconds, Michael, right now to talk about why there is a stigma. Okay, time me on this.
Starting.
Tell me when to go.
Really? I don't have a timer. Anyway.
Okay, I have a timer. Go. So there's a stigma because nobody in this world wants to be perceived as weak. And the perception of mental illness, because there is no diagnostic test, because there's no proof for a mental illness, the perception, the wonder, the question is always, is that real, or is that a reflection of somebody's weakness? And since we don't want to be seen as weak, we don't want to share what we perceive with ourselves as a weakness. And that would largely disappear if there was a quantifiable test, if there was proof, if there was an X-ray or a biopsy or an MRI, if there was any of that to say, hey, look at these numbers here, man. Look how sick I am with depression. No one would go, well, you made that up, or, you know what, you just need to suck it up. So to me, that's why the stigma still exists in 2021.
I love everything you're saying. In fact, I've told people many, many times, not that I know what it's like to have MS or diabetes, but it's like, I kind of wish I had those instead, because I can do a blood test and go, okay, this is the medication I need. This is what, whereas you, inside your own head, like you say, the stigma's in our own heads, and we play games with ourselves. It's like, am I depressed, or am I just being a suck today? Am I, and it's, I mean, as much as I advocate, I do all the wrong things when I am going through a panic attack, or I'm having depressive moments. I'm like, I do all the wrong things.
Yeah, I think that it's easier to talk about the right things to do than it is to really put them in effect, right? Like I have become really better at dealing with my depression. I've been able to give it perspective. I've been able to, as I have said in the blog I do every day, many times, because my daughter records them all, and we've done, I don't know, probably close to 2,000 of them now. I tend to repeat the same things from time to time. And my advice to people is, I said this yesterday to a friend of mine who is in a psych ward on the East Coast, desperately trying to survive, because her instinct right now is for her to take her own life. And I say, you're having a bad day. Yesterday was a better day. Today's bad day, let it be on you, but not in you. Don't embrace it. Look at it like it's the rain, right? The rain's falling. You can't stop the rain from falling, but you can stop it with a raincoat or an umbrella from actually hitting you and leaking onto your skin and making you cold and wet. Let the illness on a given day when you're not feeling well be on you, but not in you. And that's advice that I learned from telling myself, like, okay, today's a bad day. Don't think about it. Don't rationalize. What does this mean? Does it mean that if tomorrow's a bad day, that I've relapsed, that my medication's not working anymore? Just accept it as being there, and try not to evaluate it, because that's a circular argument that you'll make with yourself that will never lead anyplace else.
Beautiful. Yeah. I think the most healthiest thing a couple things. One was getting sober. I've been sober 5 years and a few weeks. And to me, awesome. Thank you. That was a massive part of my mental health recovery as well. But very similar to what you're saying, sort of, it's on you, not in you. It's that disconnect where I can observe what I'm feeling, as opposed to being, completely overwhelmed by it.
Exactly. You can be an observer at that point to your own illness. You can't talk yourself out of depression, because if I thought you could, then I would say, well, that's not depression, right? Depression is not as simple as talking yourself out of it. And you can't talk yourself into depression, but you can obsess about something to the point where now you've added another problem on top to the fact that you're having a bad day with depression. Now you're obsessing about it and you're trying to evaluate, what does this mean to me? And that's not good for anyone.
I find when I'm obsessing about something, I'm usually kind of pushing it away. So if I just accept it, then I don't obsess about it anymore because I'm dealing with it as it's coming. And
exactly, on, not in.
Yeah. So you kind of mentioned this a bit now. It's Sick Not Weak, and that's your is it a charity, I guess, or a foundation that you started?
Okay. Yeah, maybe talk about it. It's a charitable foundation that giving a speech, I guess, around 2010, I said to the audience, I said, we know the stigmas out there. That's why I'm here. I'm trying to normalize this, but nobody expresses the stigma because you don't want to get in front of a group of people and say, hey, Landsberg, I think that your illness is different than, having cancer or lupus or anything else. So I said, just someone, let's talk about this. Someone talk the way I know some of you are thinking. And someone put up their hand and said, okay, I'll do it. I don't think that what you have is nearly as bad as having, an illness like cancer. And I said, okay, well, not so much as bad as. Do you think that each one is that they are similar in that they are both physical illnesses of the body? And he said, no, I think that, mental illness is not a physical illness of your brain. It's kind of like circumstances and kind of a choice and, self-indulgence. And I said, I respect you for saying that. I asked for that. But, just so you understand that at the end of this argument, I really only want to make one point, and that's that I'm sick, but I'm not weak. And that was the first time I said it. And then I don't remember how I ended up thinking, oh, well, that kind of sums up the whole argument. But I used it again, and then I used it again, and I started to incorporate it. And then I started to use it as a hashtag on Twitter. And then I kind of thought, I want to do something more than just be Michael Landsberg and try to talk as much as I can about this thing called mental illness. I said, I want to have a bigger voice. I want to amplify other people's voices. So my daughter and I, in 2016, we started a not-for-profit, which is different than having a charity. A not-for-profit, you can't issue tax receipts to people, which is like the big difference and the reason why you want to have a charitable foundation. So it takes a couple of years to get that. We eventually got that Sick Not Weak Charitable Foundation, and we are alive and well, and trying to show people that mental illness is a sickness, but not a weakness, and to try to do it in unconventional ways, right? What is conventional? Bell Let's Talk Day is conventional, right? It's a big company putting on a thought-provoking campaign, but the boundaries that they have to stay within are like this narrow. But me saying to you, hey, can I swear? Sure. Okay. Well, I'm telling you that this is not my fucking fault, and I don't give a fucking shit what you think about it. That means my boundaries are out here, and I think I can be more effective doing that because I'm now talking the way people think, the way people react, the way people talk about their illness. They don't talk about it in a corporate, sanitized way. They talk about it in a way that's, oh God, I don't know what the fuck is going on. But when I wake up in the morning, I just so badly don't want to go through my day. So that's kind of how we run, which is to use our greatest asset, which is that we don't have to answer to anybody.
Oh, good. That's good. So if someone donates to Sick Not Weak, what kind of things do you guys do with that?
Well, what we do, I mean, right now, I have written a series of shows that are right now being in the process of being animated. And I've written some songs for these, which we ended up. I wrote the lyrics. I can't write music, and I didn't know if I could write lyrics or not. But I wrote lyrics with the purpose of turning them into rap songs, which we did with professional rapper and with a professional comedian slash everything imaginable, Sean Cullen, and we recorded these songs, and now these songs will be incorporated into the series of. I think right now it's 9 5-minute shows, which are really there to do what the charity does, which is to say sick, not weak, and to try to do it in a way that people will laugh and say, oh my God, that's so silly, or oh, I can't believe you put it that way, or oh, okay, well that gets me thinking. That's the goal, and that's kind of the dream for me, is to try to present mental health talk, which now, fortunately, is happening all over the world almost all the time, but to try to do it in a different, sort of more unique way.
So do you think you've noticed a difference about how people are talking about mental health since you first came out?
It's like, I'm one guy, like living, like I only see, like a 1/1,000,000th of what actually goes on. Right. So yeah. I don't know. I mean, I don't think we've done necessarily a bad job of it. I don't think that the talk is a bad thing.
No,
I think that, we haven't done a good job of suicide for sure. I mean, it's still, it's the numbers I'm sure will be the same or worse over the past year that they were in 2014 and 15 and 16 and on. So we clearly have a lot of work to do, but every time one person goes for help, who would not have gone for help before. Every time someone says, hey, I was watching this guy's podcast, yours, and I saw him talking about, when he was at his worst, and, he went for help, and then, he got clean and sober, and, I could relate to what he was saying. And I kind of felt like, like he seemed like he was pretty cool. He's got a great beard, and, maybe I'm going to go and tell my wife about what's going on in my life, because, people can take your power, your strength, and embrace it and apply it to themselves. So every time somebody does that, when they hear somebody like you or me, that's a win, and that's a step in the right direction.
We're winning, I guess.
Or we're losing by less, let's put it this way. If in the last decade we lost the hockey game 12-0, now, maybe we're only losing whatever, 11-1, but we're doing better.
Well, I speaking of numbers, I saw on your Sick Not Week website, these are just some of the, some stats you put on there, and I'm curious about your thoughts. 6.7 million Canadians living with mental health conditions. 4,000 Canadians die of suicide a year. 4,000. 51 billion is the economic burden of mental health in Canada, and yet governments are scared to invest in it.
Let me tell you something that will, when you went 4,000, I'm going to tell you something that gives you a much better perspective on it, and it's a lot worse. That those are completed suicides, right? So you got 4,000 people who complete the attempted suicide, but for every completed suicide, they believe there's 20 to 25 attempts. So that means there's 80,000 to 100,000 Canadians over the next year that will attempt to take their own lives. And doctors say, and I'm just repeating other people's statistics, right? But that for every person that attempts suicide, there's 10 people that have suicidal thoughts, but do not act on them, which means 800,000 to 1 million Canadians over the next year will have suicidal thoughts. And that tells you that, by ranking this like near the bottom of priorities, we're making a bad mistake. And that's not just for the medical system. Parents tell their kids, try to protect their kids in the best possible way by giving them the advantage of their own experience and what they have learned. So, be careful with alcohol, as obviously you would be a proponent of that. Be careful, like you don't drink and drive. Be careful of drugs, street drugs, prescription drugs. Be careful of getting pregnant or getting somebody else pregnant. Well, like, we warn our kids about all these things, but the thing that we have probably most to worry about, because if your kid's going to get a serious illness before your kid's 25, the biggest chance of what it will be mental illness. Far greater chance than, getting cancer or heart disease. Like, sadly, some kids do get cancer, but cancer is way more common when you get older. When you're a 17-year-old in school, there's two things that have the greatest chance to kill you. One of them is accident, and the other one is suicide. Yet we don't talk about that.
Yeah, it's the second highest killer of people between 25 and 14 years old.
Yeah,
which blows my mind.
It does.
Completely blows my and yeah, and I know, like, I've been advocating for years, and it still blows my mind that that's not a huge topic, or maybe it is, or in certain circles it is.
You're right. It should be just logical. If you were to prioritize and say, okay, hey, parents, you've only got 30 seconds with your kid every day to talk about something of importance to keep them safe. You should arrive at mental health and all that means pretty early on in those days. Maybe the first day you want to say drinking and driving, no problem with that. I mean, there's tons of important things to say to your kids, but at the top of the list has to be mental illness. And right now it's not on the list for a lot of people.
Yeah. So you're obviously close with your son and your daughter. And you said you kind of noticed some anxiety with your son. Did you ever have any parent guilt that, like, oh shit, I've passed this on to them?
No. My brain is way too logical for that. It'd be like, well, why would I blame myself? I mean, I didn't choose my genetic or his genetic inheritance. I didn't, wasn't, I mean, if I inherited this gene from one of my parents, then in theory, I should be blaming them.
Right.
Which I would never do, because that would make no logical sense to me. So no, there's enough things to legitimately feel bad about. But that one, not one of them for me, at least. But I know a lot of other people do experience, a lot of guilt with it.
Yeah. I mean, I've gotten over it, but more so because I was drinking and doing other things, like you said, legitimate things to feel guilty about, but because my son has anxiety, maybe isn't the one I should be worried about. Because you're right, I don't resent my grandfather or my father or my mother for having mental illness, so why should I beat myself up that I happen to have kids?
We human beings, though, seem to have this unusual relationship with guilt, where we look to find things to blame ourselves for, which is a weird quality to have, and not everyone has it. But a lot of us find ways to make ourselves feel guilty when just a glance from the outside has somebody saying, well, like, it's not your fault. Like, hey, like, if your son has your gene that it makes him more prone to mental illness, if you chose to give it to him, if you said, hey, if you believe in God, hey, God, you know what? Give my son that gene. Let's find out how tough he really is. Then that'd be a dick move. But, the fact is, of course, none of us get to choose what we pass down to our kids.
I've done enough dick moves. I didn't do that one.
Right, exactly. You can feel guilty about other stuff. You can feel guilty sometimes about the things that mental illness makes you do and the effect that it has on other people. I mean, that would be a story to debate as well. But the illness itself, not your fault.
Yeah. Well, even that other guilt I've worked through with 12-step groups and treatment and all types of stuff. But just going back to all those numbers you gave, I just realized none of those mentioned drug overdoses, which to me is also, I mean, for me, addiction and mental health is the same thing. Yeah. I don't separate them. And a drug overdose is still someone passing away from a mental illness, as far as I'm concerned. So, and that's not including those. So,
when Carey Price left the Canadians, I guess, I don't know, 3 weeks ago, I don't remember exactly how long it was, and said he was going in the program. The program is for mental health and addiction. It was kind of like the first thing that everybody said, myself included. I probably thought it is, like, what's wrong with him? What is it? Is it mental illness like depression or anxiety, or is it addiction? And the the curt answer to that is it doesn't matter, right? Mental illness, addiction, it's 2021. We now accept the fact that most people who are addicted are self-medicating from some kind of mental illness. So in fact, it's all mental illness, and addiction is a symptom for some people of mental illness. Very few people, I think, get for instance, become alcoholics because they just love in a reasonably, like, they just have so much fun when they're drinking. A lot of people get addicted to alcohol because they feel so much better about themselves when they're drinking, but that's not the same thing. So almost always it's a way to cope with our lives better. And unless you treat the underlying mental health cause of this, then, my brother was one of those people. He could not get over his addiction to alcohol and to prescription pills until some doctor said to him, you got panic disorder, and you got anxiety, and you got depression, but mostly panic disorder. And, you need to be treated for that. And then let's find out whether you need alcohol to cope. Never took another drink.
Is there anybody that you kind of hold responsible to contributing, helping you recover and to kind of get it? Well, I'm guessing stiff on maybe that conversation, but is there anyone else like in your life that really helped you to recover and to move on?
For me, I think, I don't take credit for much in my life, but I will say that this was, as has to be the case with most people, or with everyone, right? People can help you along the way, but they can't take you there. Right. You can't, I'm not a big fan of, even though there's nothing wrong with saying it. So I'm not criticizing people who say, you're never alone. I don't think that's true. We are alone to some extent all the time, and everyone with an illness is alone. If you're going for chemotherapy and you're sitting in that chair and you're hooked up to these toxic drugs, you can have a friend sitting beside you, but you're still battling that on your own, right? You can't split the pain, you can't split the fear. So what I look to do is I hope that you can help someone, both you and I, feel understood. And when you feel understood, all of a sudden now you feel less alone. You feel like, hey, I'm not the only one. Oh my gosh. Those guys that I heard on that podcast, they seem to feel the same things I'm feeling. And that makes me feel better about myself. So I kind of look at it like, I came to this conclusion on my own. But that doesn't mean that along the way, I didn't have the benefit of people who loved me, who were willing to accept my illness as an illness and not as a self-inflicted wound. So I think in a lot of ways, I think the biggest thing that I had when I was growing up, I had parents that loved me, who really gave me love unconditionally. And I think that's one of the reasons why when I started talking about mental illness, I didn't feel that sense of shame. I had this confidence that I could come out and talk about it. I think they gave me the confidence to go for the career that I went for, because in their eyes, I was just kind of super cool. Cool is not a word that probably they would have used, but I kind of feel like that's why this became, so easy for me, because I had the confidence to accept myself and my illness and to not care what other people thought.
Right. Oh, good. Yeah. I mean, technically, yeah, same with me, but there was I am going to say my doctor really, and the only reason I say my doctor is because he really validated everything. And I talk to people all the time with mental health issues. Validation is probably the biggest thing that really, that's what I didn't get the first time I went to the hospital, was validation. And so, yeah, he really validated what I was going through and my emotions. And he's the one that really did research, because he wasn't even sure how the mental health services worked. He's a small town doctor in Saskatchewan. He's from Iran. He was new to the country, and he did a lot of research for me and gave me the options. And so for him, I do give him a lot of credit for.
Yeah, validation is a great word to strive for, right? I think in a lot of ways, it's kind of in the same category as my description of people feel like they're understood. And when you feel like you're understood, you feel like you're validated. And when you go to the hospital, to the ER, and you feel like your life is on the line and you get turned away, what's that saying? That's saying what, we don't think you're as sick as you say you are. Even if they say, well, we don't have a lot of room here, blah, 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 still, like you told them that your life is in jeopardy and they sent you home. That is incredibly demeaning and horrifying in so many different ways. That's the opposite of validation.
Yeah, exactly. I was embarrassed that I even looked for help.
Yeah. When they send you out, hey, I've never experienced that, but I have heard that story from so many people where it's like, oh my gosh, what I thought was this illness that was going to be fatal for me. In other people's minds, they see me as not even being worthy of being admitted to the hospital. Imagine, if you had a gunshot wound and you went to the ER and they said, hey, you know what? Yeah, you got shot in the stomach, but there's no major organs. So yeah, you know what? We can't take everyone. So, if you think you're dying, you could come back again. That's the problem is no one would do that with a gunshot wound because you can see it. Oh my gosh, Landsberg, he's got a hole in his stomach. We better fix that or he's going to die. But, you show up at the ER and you have no way to prove that you're as sick as you are.
Yeah. And to not even give me other options is just go home. It wasn't like, here's maybe, I don't know. Because it's like you're either in the hospital or not. It's triage or home. And there was like, maybe it's different now, but there's no, it's a very big spectrum, mental health, but yet the services are very black and white.
Yeah, I think it's, I don't think it's any better now, to be honest with you.
I don't either.
I think that it's a reflection of a system that cannot accommodate all of the need that's out there. And it's okay, you got a patient here and a patient there. There's Todd, and Todd is sitting there saying he feels like he's suicidal. And there is a person who has 104 fever and an infection somewhere, and we're not sure what that is. I can only admit one of them. They're going to admit the 104 fever every single time. Yet you've already said, I'm a real danger to myself. Not to say that the 104 fever shouldn't be admitted to the hospital, but really, like he or she goes and you go home, not right.
Yeah, that's right. And that whole thing about validation too. I was thinking of your story about talking to the gentleman about cancer, and he basically invalidated mental health issues too by saying he doesn't see it in so many ways, and because of that, I do compare my mental health with cancer, and something I do because I'm a suicide attempt survivor. I often tell people I'm a proud I'm screwing it all. I'm a proud suicide attempt survivor. Why can't I be? Why can't I be proud that I made it through something awful? You always hear proud cancer survivors, which absolutely you should be proud that you fought that battle and you won. Why is it so shaming? Why is it so, why the stigma that just because, and I know why, because we've kind of discussed it already. It's a weakness, not an illness, but
you can't prove it, right? The cancer survivor could say, hey, take a look at this x-ray on my lungs. And, they thought I was dying. And now 5 years later, here I am. I'm proud of
cancer-free.
Great. You should be.
Yeah.
But, like I say, hey, like 2008 for me, off the record, we did 210 shows that year. I didn't miss any of them. And I felt like hell. And I'm proud of the fact that I showed up every single day, no matter how little I thought of myself, no matter how low my self-esteem, no matter how much I feared failure, no matter how I loathed everything that I did, no matter the fact that I could barely look the camera in the eyes, let alone, or in the lens, let alone look someone in the eyes. So I'm proud of that, right? But others would look and go, I guess you weren't so sick, or okay, sure. If you want to be proud, okay.
How many sports figures have you talked to that are open about mental health?
I can't give you a number, but not many.
Really? I thought.
Well, I mean, like the whole, like if you were to go through, which I have done in doing research for the animated show that I'm doing, celebrities with mental illness, I mean, the list is, it's not like there's 2,000 people on that list, right? If you talk
Right.
about sports, there's probably 100 people who have come out and said, yeah, I have a mental health challenge. So I've probably spoken to 20 of them.
Mm.
And there was someone who just came back to the Las Vegas Raiders offensive lineman who missed 3 games because of depression and anxiety. I don't remember his name. He's a 3-time Pro Bowler. He's 31 years old. And when he left a month ago, it just said he needed personal time off, which sometimes is like the clue for, it must be mental health or addiction, right?
Yeah.
Because if it's a physical ailment, do they ever say, oh, he needs time off if he needed dental surgery or if he needed arthroscopic surgery in his knee? No, they would tell you what it is. So it's kind of like the process of elimination is, well, the only thing it could be is that. So, I've spoken to a handful of them for sure. Every time I do, I think that there's real value in them telling their story, not because they count for any more than anyone else. But because people pay attention to their story. If you did a show with someone from your small town who is, who works in a restaurant, owns a restaurant in your town, and you spoke to him or her about their depression, it would be just as important as if you speak to Simone Biles, the American gymnast.
Right.
But not as many people would gravitate to watching it. If the headline was, Indian head restaurateur battles depression, that's going to garner less interest than, something with somebody more famous. But it doesn't mean that the more famous person's story is more important. It just means that people pay attention to it. And the biggest thing that we need to do, and I've learned this from a psychiatrist who has been working with me, giving me advice on how can I talk about suicide in the best possible way? Because my instinct is always, if somebody famous takes their life, we should talk about it. Anthony Bourdain, for instance. And he said, no, it's the opposite. We should be talking about people who had suicidal thoughts, or maybe who attempted suicide, did not complete suicide, and have gone on to live and to thrive and to deal with their illness. That's what people need to hear. They need to hear that you can have these thoughts. You can feel like you're at the edge, that you're looking over the edge, and that there is treatment that can bring you back from the edge and give you back your life, which is, I think, probably describing your story. So your story is more important to hear in a lot of ways than, somebody who is way more famous than you, but maybe ended up completing suicide and taking their own life.
Yeah. My story's more important.
Yeah.
Why are they getting all the
famous
attention?
people? Yeah. Yeah. It's all about me.
Well, thanks again, Michael. I won't take up any more of your time. I appreciate everything you said. I can't agree with you more. And it's nice to have someone that is better with words to actually express what
I wouldn't say that. I was going to say it's nice to have somebody who speaks your language. And think of it this way, as this is you wrapping it up, not me. I'm not going, oh, well, like I got nothing but time to talk about this. But think about it this way, that, mental illness is a language where the words all sound like every other word in the English language. But unless you understand what those words mean, they pass you by, like the loss of the ability to experience joy. You can't understand that. If 2 people are sleeping beside each other and one of them's battling severe depression and the other isn't, one speaks the language and the other does not. And that's really important to remember. And that is a great way for me to say, thanks for talking to me and making me feel like I'm understood.
Thank you so much, Michael, for that. That was amazing that you did that. It's amazing all the work you're doing, and I really, really appreciate all of it, and especially talking to me. So thank you. Now, if you like that interview, or if you know someone who might like that interview, or someone that might just like Michael Landsberg, then why not tell someone about it? Why not tell all your friends about it? Why not follow me on Facebook and on Twitter? Yeah, I'm on Twitter now. I don't know what exactly I'm doing on Twitter, but I'm on there. And I'm on Instagram under Daddy Cries Book. So tell a friend, tell a family, tell the world about this podcast. It's been helping lots of people. I get all types of messages and things. If you want to message me, go ahead and message me. I really believe that these people that I'm interviewing, telling their stories and stuff, really does help other people relate and, know that they're not alone. So please, listen and share. Okay, now, next week, I do that every time, not next week, next episode, I am talking to a young lady named Haley Rose. I believe she's from Texas. I found her on Instagram. I follow all types of mental health stuff on Instagram, and she's got quite the little profile there. She has a lot of humor. She talks about bipolar and psychosis and ADHD and a whole bunch of other stuff, and she does little skits and videos and stuff, and I found it quite humorous, and I thought she was really great, so I reached out and asked if she would be willing to talk, and she was willing. So that is next episode. Stay tuned for that. She's really funny, and we have a really nice chat, so stay tuned for that. Thank you for listening, and please subscribe, rate, and review however you are listening to this podcast. It only takes a moment, and it really helps the show out with getting noticed. This episode has been sponsored by Penny University Bookstore, 3104 13th Avenue. Call 639-571-2186 and check out their online bookstore at pennyu.ca. The Saskatchewan Podcast Network is supported by Connexus. Wellness, however you define it, is achievable. You don't even need to figure it all out by yourself. Talk to Connexus. They'll give you guidance, motivation, and the push you need to reach your goals. They've got you. They're your financial partner, and they know you can achieve your very best, your financial best. Prove them right. Start right at Connexus Credit Union. The Saskatchewan Podcast Network is also sponsored by Direct West. Are you a business owner looking for new avenues to promote your business? Direct West digital billboards are a great opportunity to highlight a new product, new promotion, or anything else you'd like your customers to know about. You can get local, expert marketing help for your business at directwest.com. If you are having a mental health crisis, please call the Canadian Crisis number at 1-833-456-4566. In Saskatchewan, the mobile crisis team in Prince Albert is 306-764-1011. In Regina, it's 306-525-5333, and in Saskatoon, it's 306-933-6200. Don't forget to check out my children's book, Sometimes Daddy Cries. Sometimes Daddy Cries is told through the eyes of a boy whose father suffers from depression. He sees his dad get sad, rest, and even go to the hospital, all while comparing his father's depression to a physical ailment. Available on Amazon.ca. I'll see you next time. This is Todd Redebaum saying, make your beds and take your meds. Bye.